Mm.
All right. So today, continuing to share some perspectives about Purim. Purim in perspective, class number 2. And today I want to deal with the following question. What in the world is the deal? What is the deal with the name Purim?
Ah,
Why would we call this holiday Purim? Now, what is Purim? So a pur is a lot, and Purim are lots, plural. So we may deal with why it's in the plural. It's not really going to be our focus as much as why we would name a holiday after lots. So where does it actually come from? It actually comes from the Megillah itself. So in chapter 9 of the Megillah Esther, so we'll just read a couple of verses leading up to the verse that that actually makes reference to the name, but it says that this is on the source sheet, that Haman, who was the enemy of the Jews, he had a plot to destroy the Jews. He peel pur, and he cast a pur, a lot or lots, hu ha-goral, which by the way is a goral, is a lottery. Pur seems to be a Aramaic or Persian word, and goral would be the Hebrew. To terrify them and destroy them, they translate here. Okay. And then it says, and when she, Esther, came before the king, Amar, Ima Sefer, he commanded through letters, that the plan that Haman had devised against the Jews should go back on his own head. And they hung him and his sons on the tree. And then we have our verse 26, chapter 9, verse 26. Al Cain, therefore, Purim. Therefore, we call these days Purim, Al Shem HaPur, because of the lottery. Al Cain, therefore, Al Kol Divrei HaYigares Azos, because of all the words of this letter, Umara'u Al Kacha, what they saw concerning this matter, Mahigia Alehem, and what happened to them. So it's a very, very strange verse, very hard to break it down. It says, therefore, they call these days Purim because of the pur, because of the lottery. Therefore, on all the words of this letter and what they saw about this and what happened to them. So it sounds like in the flow of these 3 verses that because Haman plotted to destroy us, and he did so through a lottery, and that plan was reversed. So therefore, we call the holiday Purim, because he plotted to destroy us starting with a lot, and his plan was reversed. So, okay, so makes a little bit of sense maybe that he used a lot as part of his plan to destroy us, and it was reversed. So let's call this holiday the holiday of lots. But it seems to be far from the point of the holiday. If anything, we are celebrating our salvation. So, Pesach, Passover. So why is it called Passover? So, because God passed over the Jewish houses, that was part of the salvation. He could have called it something else. You could still ask why that name, but at least it wasn't like, we don't call the holiday of, I don't know, slavery, or, because that's where it all started, or like the holiday of bricks, the holidays, something with the suffering or the decree that was against us. You call the holiday something that has to do with the salvation that came about. So why would we call this holiday Purim? Because Haman used lots to determine when to destroy us. Let's call it the holiday of victory, or the holiday of salvation, or something like that. So we're going to offer 5 approaches for why this holiday is called Purim. They're not all going to answer every part of our question. They're not all going to explain the verse. Some of them will. Some of them might explain the plural, some of them not. and some of them might be able to combine with other answers, some of them not, but we'll get 5 perspectives on the name Purim. So the first is that, and this is an explanation that a number of commentaries discuss. It's a little bit more, Kabbalistic or deep, and that has to do with the idea of mazel, the idea of there being certain times that are auspicious, and Haman being someone who was in touch with the forces of Tumah, the forces of impurity, was not just casting lots to randomly figure out what day would be the best day to destroy, or what day he would, would be a fun day to destroy the Jews, but rather what day would be the best day to destroy the Jews. What day would the mazel, the luck, the alignment of the stars be the absolute worst day for the Jews? And that's what he was trying to determine with the lots that he cast. And he came out to this day, the 13th of Adar. And that's what he was aiming for. And so explains the Vilna Gaon and others that the reason we would call this holiday the holiday of lots, the holiday of Purim, is really to accentuate how great this miracle really was. Because it's not just that that Haman cast lots, or to say, it's not just that we were saved, but we were saved on a day where the mazel, the alignment of the stars, would have said that we have no chance, that this is the worst day for the Jews. And even still, God, so to speak, puts the Jewish people above mazel, that if we merit, then we're not affected by mazel. And despite it being such a day that was sort of destined for destruction, still God overpowered the mazalos, the constellations, and we were saved. And not only that, but some add, the Vilna Gaon and the Shla and others say that it's not just that we were saved, but we were victorious on this day. So on a day where the lot were against us, where luck was totally against us, it's not just that we achieved salvation, but on the contrary, we were victorious. So by calling it the day Purim, we're really saying that we're really accentuating, expressing how great of a miracle this really was by saying that this was a day. It's the day of lots. It's the day where luck was against us, where the lots were against us, where destiny may have, the alignment of the stars was against us. And not only were we saved, but we were even victorious over our enemies. That's why we call this day the day of Purim. That's answer number 1. Okay. Answer number 2 and 3 are maybe of a similar genre of answer, as we'll see, but really coming from very different angles. And answer so answer number 2, I saw quoted from it's like a periodical that was put out, I don't know, many years ago. I guess in the 1930s maybe, because it was a periodical put out in honor of the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the Yeshiva Chachmei Lublin, Rabbi Meir Shapiro, of Daf Yomi fame, but really many other, the founder of Daf Yomi, but also many other great accomplishments, including the founding of the Yeshiva Chachmei Lublin in the city of Lublin. And so this was an article written actually by a rabbi from Toronto in this periodical. His name was Rabbi Grubert, and he's addressing this question. He's addressing why we would call the holiday Purim when it's seemingly nothing to do with the salvation, rather about the decree against us. And his suggestion is that really the very fact that Haman decided to go the route of casting lots was a miracle. And not only that, but the way the lots played out was a miracle for us. Because Haman storms home And maybe actually let's take a look at some verses here. The second source on the page, Megillas Esther, Perek Gimel, chapter 3, verses 6 and 7, where it says that basically this is a Haman's walking around. He sees Mordechai. Mordechai won't bow to him. He's very angry. And it says that it was contemptible in his eyes to only cast hands against Mordechai, etc. And really, he wanted to destroy all of the Jews in the entire kingdom. And then in verse 7, it tells us about the lots that he cast. Right then he goes, he's so angry. So what does he do? He casts lots. Why? Okay, you'll say because he wants to figure out what the best day to do it is. But in a certain sense, the best day is today, right? Let's just get it done. And or today, tomorrow, to make quick work of them. But rather, it says in the first month of the month of Nisan, which was the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus's reign, he pil pur hua gara lifnei Haman. He cast lots miyom liyom lechodesh lechodesh, from day to day and from month to month, to the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. And from subsequent verses, we find out that it actually came out to the 13th of Adar. So let's just keep track of the calendar here. The verse tells us that when did he cast these lots? In the month of Nisan. So in the first month. And when did they come out to? When was going to be doomsday for the Jewish people? In the month of Adar, which is 12 months later. So although in the previous answer we said, yeah, but that day was the Mazalos, the constellation said that this was a really terrible day for the Jewish people. But on the other hand, it gives them a lot of time to figure something out. 12 months. So now it's important to keep in mind the actual story of the Megillah, the beginning, the whole story involving Esther and Mordechai. I mean, Esther comes to power, becomes queen about 5 years before this. But then subsequent to that, the decree and everything and the parties and everything's just a matter of days before Haman. It's about 3 days between when Haman makes his decree and when he gets hung. So that actually happens very fast. And then there's the postscript, the last 3 chapters of the Megillah, which are important and are all about what happens after Haman is hung. That takes a little bit longer. That's months and months dragging out. But the actual story with Haman actually happens very quickly. But in any event, so Haman decides that he's going to determine this based on lots. Now, especially in those days, Rabbi Grubert says, life was much less reliable than we assume we'll live forever, and we definitely live longer than people did in those days, and especially somebody in the government of a king like Ahasuerus, like we saw what happened and how quickly Ahasuerus changed his mind about him. So Haman should have known this and considered this, and therefore wanted to get this done quickly. But yet he decided to go the route of lots because that's what he believed in. He believed in the lots, the mazalos. This was the only way to do it for him. But that really worked out to our benefit. And in the end, it ended up giving us a lot of time to prepare for that day. And it gave us time for, again, it didn't take a long time for Mordechai and Esther to respond and deal with Haman, but this gave us the time that was necessary, and therefore, in appreciation of that, we call the holiday Purim. We call it lots because it was the lots that actually gave us the time needed to respond by gathering for prayer, to respond by doing teshuvah, to respond with hishtadlus, with putting in political lobbying and etc. But this is what gave us the time. So therefore, we express our appreciation for that by calling it lots and by calling it Purim. And Actually, the Malbim in his commentary, when he talks about this verse that we just read, where Haman cast his lots, so it says that he cast his lots miyom liyom, from day to day, umechodesh lechodesh, and from month to month. So the Malbim picks up on this and he wants to explain, what does that mean from day to day and from month to month? There are different explanations, but the Malbim says that here was Haman in the month of Nisan. Now, really, Haman himself wants to get this done fast. He really wasn't planning to have this drag out. So he said, okay, it's the month of Nisan. So let me figure out what day of Nisan it should happen. Now, what day of Nisan was it? It was actually the 13th of Nisan. We see that from not this verse, but another verse. So it was the 13th day of Nisan. So he said, what day of Nisan should I destroy them in? So he started to cast lots. And he first said, however, he did it exactly, but first will be the 14th. And that didn't work. The 15th, the 16th, the 17th, the 18th. And it kept, the response, however it worked, kept being no, 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 no. So finally, he went all the way through all the numbers and came back to 13, right? Because he had started at 14, because it was the 13th of Nisan. He was trying to figure out which day of Nisan to kill them. So he said the 14th, nope, the 15th, all the way to the end. And then when he got to 30, and it was no, so then he had to start back at 1. So he went 1, 2, 3. And finally, the last possible number was 13. It came out to 13. So he's like, okay, I'm going to do it on the 13th. Now, the 13th was today. It wasn't going to work today, as fast as he wanted to do it. He had to. So then he said, well, I have to figure out which month to do it in. So he said, the way he says is he actually did that month. Should it be this month, Nisan? And it was no Nisan, Sivan Tammuz, all the way. And it was the last possible month that it could come out was Adar. So that's, God engineered it that it was the last possible day in the way that he was counting. And then he decided, I'm going to do months too. It was the last possible month. So the Malbim says Haman should have realized at that point that there was somebody, working behind the scenes here to foil his plan. But he didn't. And he kept pursuing it. But again, there was this great miracle already with the lots themselves. The fact that Haman cast lots and the way that the lots came out to give us the most time and the way that he did it was itself miraculous. And that's what we want to remember by calling this holiday the holiday of Purim, the holiday of lots. Okay, fine. So that's answer number 2. So answer number 1 is that we call it the holiday of Purim because it highlights the great miracle that even though the mazel was so bad on this day, yet it was flipped around. And as actually we read after the Megillah reading, we read a liturgical poem called Asher Heini, and in that poem there's a line that says Kippur Haman nepach lePurenu. The Pur of Haman flipped to become our Pur. His lot became our lot, and that terrible mazel that was decreed for us actually flipped somehow to become a good day for us. That was answer number 1. Answer number 2 is that, again, you could still read into this line, but his lots actually came to benefit us because they gave us more time to respond to the terrible decree. Okay, answer number 3 is a little creative. It's a similar idea that by calling it Purim, we're trying to highlight some part of the miracle. In that case, the answer number 2, we're highlighting that the lots played an important role in the miracle. Answer number 3, a little bit creative. The Be'er Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Salant suggests that if you go towards the end of the Megillah, where basically the last we see of Haman, where Haman finally meets his downfall, the climax, the verse says in chapter 7, so after Esther has identified to Achashverosh, the man who's trying to destroy her and her people, so it says that Achashverosh got up, he went out to the garden to get some air. He was so angry. And it says he came back. He came back to where they were having their feast. Haman had fallen or fell at that point on the bed that Esther was on top of. And he fell on Esther. And the Midrash says that it was an angel pushed him on. It was God's intervention. That whichever, whether you understand it was an angel, it wasn't. It was God intervening and causing Haman to fall upon Esther, which got the king really angry and really sealed Haman's fate. And the king said, "Are you really going to try to force the queen with me in the house?" Whatever that looked like, I was trying to kill her. He was trying to do something else to her. Whatever it was, it looked very bad, and that got Achashverosh extra angry, and that was ultimately the final straw for Haman. And an important part of the very important part of the miracle of Purim was that moment where Haman, and again, every detail is important, but that moment where Haman falls on the bed of Esther, the Megillah felt it necessary to tell us that, because Purim is, you lost me. You lost me for a second.
You're back.
Yeah, okay.
You were frozen for a second.
I saw my internet go out for a second. Okay, so in Aramaic, I don't know how long was I out for?
About 10 or 15 seconds.
Okay, 10 or 15 seconds. So let's go back a step. So that moment where Haman falls on the bed, if the Megillah feels the need to tell us that, it's obviously very important. And it is, we can tell from the story that was an important aspect of the miracle. Every detail is important, but this was kind of the climax. What does that have to do with Purim? So the Aramaic word for a bed is a pariah, and the name Purim in Hebrew, in Aramaic, is also pariah. So, and the Ber Yosef brings a couple of examples of this. Actually, one of them appears in the last source where it says, famous idea, which we may have time to touch on at the end, that a person is obligated to become intoxicated with wine on Purim until he does not know the Torah distinguish between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. But it says, well, how does it call Purim in Aramaic? Pariah. And the word pariah also is the same Aramaic word for a bed. So he suggests that the sages, when they were enacting Mordechai and whoever, when they were that was the spoken language in that time, in was Aramaic, and when they were enacting this holiday, so they wanted to hint as well to this moment of the salvation, again, maybe to bring out that each detail was important, and this final step, this final straw, where Haman falls on the bed, was an essential part of the miracle, and therefore they called it Purim, which is really in Aramaic is pariah, and again with this idea that obviously at the same time it says in the verse it was because of the lots. So at the same time referencing the lots of Haman cast Purim, lots, pariah, to try to destroy us, and he was destroyed because of pariah, because of the bed that he fell on. That's how he met his end. So in order to hint to that, they called it pariah or Purim, and again it's bringing out a certain detail that was important to the miracle. So that's a similar type of answer as answer number two. Answer number two saying the lots themselves were important to the miracle because the way they played out, it gave us time to be able to respond properly to the threat. And this answer says it's actually hinting to another idea, which is the prior bed on which Haman fell, which was also an important part of the miracle. Okay. Answer number four. So answer number four requires a little bit of a buildup. And this is really the Be'er Yosef's main answer. What I just mentioned was an additional answer he gives, but this is his main approach. Rav Yosef Salant he was a Rav in Yerushalayim before the state even, I think, in the 40s, but also post, I think, in the 50s. And he suggests as follows. So let's look at, if you have the source sheet, the next source, it's the second to last source. Sorry, the last source on page 1. And it's a passage in the Gemara, in the Talmud. And it says, Amar Reb Shmuel bar Yehuda. Reb Shmuel bar Yehuda says, Esther sent a message to the sages. She said, establish me for future generations. It's not so clear what she meant by that, what the Gemara means, establish me for future generations. We'll share in a moment what the Be'er Yosef thinks it means. And they respond, Shalchula, kinat moreres aleinu levengus. If we establish you, you will arouse wrath or jealousy amongst the nations. Shalchalhem, she sent back, I'm already written in the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. So it's no problem. So in other words, just a simple reading, it seems that when she says establish me for generations, we could say she means to write a book about me. Let there be, some understand the holidays, some understand let there be a Megillah about me, about my story. She's not looking for her own fame, but she wants to bring out the miracle that God brought for us. And they said, but that's going to cause jealousy amongst the nations. And then she said, well, the story is already written. It's already recorded in the chronicles of Persia and Media. Okay. The Be'er Yosef suggests that what was really going on in this conversation was that, of course, you can tell the story of the salvation, but you can't really tell it the way it happened. Because the problem is that to tell the real story is a big insult to the king, Achashverosh. Because, in fact, Achashverosh was a accomplice in Haman's plan, and not just an accomplice, but played a major, was ultimately the one who held the power in Haman's plan to originally annihilate the Jews, and he was totally on board. And so to really express the greatness of this miracle, you have to include that. You can't leave that out of the story. That's such a major part of the story. Such a major part of the miracle was that even the king wanted to annihilate them, and his sudden change of heart was part of the miracle. But you can't write that. They said you're going to cause anger amongst the nations, not just amongst the nations, but the king himself will not stand for such a thing. So she responded, well, the story is already written in the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. Now, obviously, in the chronicles of the kings of Persia, it doesn't say that Achashverosh was going to annihilate a nation and then change his mind. They would conveniently leave that part out. And so she was saying, write the Megillah the way it's written in the chronicles. Don't mention Achashverosh's role. Don't mention how he was an accomplice to Haman. Now we know that he was. The sages revealed this to us. It's not explicit in the Megillah. It's possible to read around it. But the Gemara, the Talmud, the Midrash reveals to us that Achashverosh was, in fact, very much on board with destroying the Jewish people. If you look at page number 2 at the top, so one example, the Gemara says that you can understand the relationship of Achashverosh and Haman with the following parable. To what may they be compared? To two individuals. One had a mound in the middle of his field, and the other had a ditch in the middle of his field. One guy has a lot of dirt he wants to get rid of. One guy has a hole he needs to fill in. So they realize that they could help each other. One guy needs to get rid of his dirt, and the other guy needs the dirt to fill his hole. So finally, they say that whatever. Basically, they come up with this agreement to work together, and that was the Gemara says similar to the relationship of Achashverosh and Haman. That they both wanted to get rid of the Jews. In a way, if you say like, I don't know who's supposed to be the one with the mound of dirt. Like maybe Achashverosh has this pile of dirt. It's the Jews, and Haman has a big hole he wants to fill. However, you understand that the point is that they were both in on this. That's what's, and not just in on this, but both very excited at the idea of our annihilation. And lest you think, says the Ber Yosef, that maybe that was at the beginning, but later he, after he changed his mind, he really started to love the Jews. Says no. The Gemara tells us that, and this is the second to last source, Hu Achashverosh. The very first verse in the Megillah says it was in the days of Achashverosh. He was the Achashverosh who reigned, and it's kind of redundant. He was the Achashverosh, and the Gemara says what that's telling us is he was the same Achashverosh from the beginning to the end. He remained. He was evil from the beginning, wicked from the beginning, and wicked in the end. Even after he had his change of heart, but really he still bore hatred for the Jewish people, and that's who the sages reveal to us Achashverosh really was. But like we said, you can't write that in a Megillah when Achashverosh is still around, and so they were faced with the problem. You really want to teach how great this miracle was, you have to have all the details. But on the other hand, you can't really share the details. So the solution that Esther was suggesting was that we should write it like the Chronicles of Persia and Media, and never explicitly reference Achashverosh's role, but leave it to the sages to who know how to interpret it. And so you have certain things like when Haman goes to Achashverosh, he says there is a certain nation that is scattered, and so he doesn't say who. And so you could say, well, Achashverosh didn't know who he was talking about, and he never knew that he was planning to destroy the Jews, and he was never a partner in this. But the Gemara and the Midrash teach that no, he knew exactly who, and they had a whole discussion about it. And Achashverosh was actually afraid at first to try to take on the Jews, because he knew what happened to all the other kings and rulers who had tried to annihilate the Jews. He knew what happened to Paro and others, and so he was afraid. But it doesn't have that in the Megillah because he can't. So it's written in this way that you don't really realize necessarily that Achashverosh is really partnering with Haman, but in fact he is. And even later, when Esther says, there's someone trying to destroy me and my people. And Achashverosh says, "Who is this? Who's that?" He didn't know. Like this, only 3 days had passed since he had agreed to this plan. So again, the Megillah is written in a way that makes it seem like he didn't know, but of course, he really did know. And and he's actually, Ber Yosef says something very fascinating. It's an interesting perspective. He says we have in the commentaries a major dispute regarding this point, that did Achashverosh know what was going on? And basically, if you follow those who learn based on Pshat, the simple reading, so the Malbim and the Yosef Lekach and earlier commentaries as well, they all take the position that Achashverosh didn't know. Haman tricked him. He didn't tell him what nation he was talking about. They have to deal with the question, why didn't Achashverosh ask? Okay, they deal with that. But Achashverosh didn't know. He wasn't really, he just gave Haman the power. Okay, if they're such a bad people, then get rid of them. I take your word for it. I'm not even going to ask. I don't want to be biased. If they're as bad as you say, then they deserve to be destroyed. But he never knew who they were. That's one position. The position, though, of our sages, of the Gemara and the Midrash, as we're saying, is that he knew exactly, and he was an accomplice, and he hated the Jews as much as Haman. So in the commentary of Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, he gets very annoyed with all those who go against the tradition of the sages of the Gemara and the Midrash, and he says, like, why are you diverging from the tradition of the Gemara, of the Talmud? So the Ber Yosef says, well, we can understand why he's bothered by this divergence, but on the other hand, they're right in a way. In terms of the simple reading, that's how it was meant to be written. Those commentaries who leave Achashverosh out of the plot, they're explaining it based on pshat, based on the simple reading, and it was meant to be read that way on the simple reading, because it was meant to be written in a way that it did not divulge that Achashverosh was part of the plan. In fact, I think maybe the Malbim, if somebody says as a proof that Achashverosh couldn't have known, he says, because the Megillah was written in that time, and how could you write in the Megillah that Achashverosh was planning to destroy the people when that makes him look so bad, and he's still around, he's still the king. So the response is, no, he was part of the plot, but they didn't write it in that way. They specifically wrote it in a way that left him out. And but really, it's up to us to dig a little deeper and to learn out and realize that really he was in fact part of this plot. And he says that's also why it's called Megillas Esther, the book of Esther. The word Esther comes from the word seser, which means hidden. So on the one hand, many explain that it's called Esther because the miracle was hidden. It was done in a hidden way. It was through natural means. It was a hidden miracle. But he's saying that you can also say that it's called the hidden Megillah because part of the miracle itself is hidden within the Megillah. This aspect, the participation of Achashverosh, is hidden. To really the real appreciation of what happened is actually hidden in the words of the Megillah. You have to discover it, and you have to know. And it's being called Megillas Esther because it's telling you there's something hidden within here. Go and find it. And that is this point that the miracle is really greater than what you see on the pages of the Megillah, because really the king himself was part of the plot to annihilate the Jews, and he had this great change of heart, and that's a major part of the miracle. Says the Ber Yosef, now we can answer our original question: why do we call this day Purim? Because of the poor. And he says, so he doesn't deal so much with why are we calling it the day of lots. We can actually maybe still use some of our other explanations for why that word, but he wants to deal with why do we use the Aramaic word Purim instead of the word Goral, which is the Hebrew. So meaning the Megillah itself has to keep translating it. The poor is a Goral. The poor, the lots, it's a Goral, it's a lottery, the Hebrew word lottery. So call the day, if you want to call the day after lots, so call it by the Hebrew word. Call it Goral Day, Goralos, whatever, something like that. So why, if we're going to for whatever reason we want to name it lots, but why the Hebrew name? Why not the Hebrew name for lots, which is Goral, as the Megillah itself testifies to? Hu ha Goral, that was the Goral. Why call it Purim? So he wants to read the verse as follows, and we could go back to the first source, verse 26. Therefore, they called these days Purim after the name Pur. Therefore, they called this name Purim and not Goralos after the name Pur, because of all the words of this letter, because of all of the words of the Megillah. Meaning, in order that we should understand that the whole Megillah is similar to this, just like where we have the we wrote the name Pur in a Persian way, instead of in the Hebrew way. The whole Megillah is that way. The whole Megillah is written in a Persian way, meaning it's written to satisfy the Persian people of the time, to satisfy the Persian king. But you have to read the Megillah with the understanding that just as the word pur is just the Persian version of the word Gorah, so too this whole letter, this whole Megillah, it's the Persian version of the Megillah. But there's something deeper underneath that you have to uncover, which is our version of the Megillah, which involves an understanding that the story was quite different than what we see on the pages, and the king himself was a participant in this plot, and the miracle is actually much greater than what meets the eye. So that's his suggestion. The reason why, again, it doesn't explain why we call it lots, but it explains this verse, and it explains why in the Aramaic and not in the Hebrew. He says, because, and the way to read this verse is, therefore they call this day Purim in the Aramaic and not Hebrew, to tell you, to read the whole letter this way, read it, realize that this is just the Persian version of the letter, but there's our version underneath the surface. It's Megillas Esther. There's a hidden Megillah in here. There's a hidden message, and it's for us to bring it out. Okay, that's answer number 4. Answer number 5, quickly, for those who can stick with us, is as follows. The message is, the way that we framed the question at the beginning was, why would we focus on the lots, which are, really, if anything, the bad part, the decree against us, instead of the salvation? We should call it the day of salvation. So the Ksav Sofer suggests that what this is teaching us is that the celebration is not only over our salvation. We have a famous idea that the Gemara teaches us, that in the days of Achashverosh, we had a reacceptance of Torah. We had a newfound appreciation for God's love for us, for God's guidance of us after the miracle. We wouldn't have had that had this not happened. In other words, a decree, so there's a decree to destroy us. We're saved. So where does that leave us? It leaves us back really where we started. Is that really reason to have such a major celebration? Maybe. But our sages teach us that there's more to it than that. We were in a new place after all this happened. We were on a new level of teshuvah, of returning to God, and we have reached new heights following the miracle of Purim. We wouldn't have gotten there if not for the decree of Haman, if not for the poor, if not for the lots that he cast and the decree that he made. We would not have reached this new state of this new height of spirituality, of connection, and therefore that's what we're celebrating on Purim, and therefore we focus not only on the salvation but on the decree itself. We're, in the end, after we're saved, we're happy that we had this decree, because that, as the Talmud says, that the removal of Achashverosh's ring and giving it to Haman had a greater impact on us to cause us to repent than all the prophets that preceded. They weren't able to get us to the same place of repentance that this decree did. So sometimes a danger, a potential danger, can be good, because it can turn us around. And therefore, in hindsight, we look back and we say, "Wow, what a great thing this was that Haman tried to do this to us." Because ultimately, we reached a new level in our acceptance of Torah, which we wouldn't have reached otherwise. And therefore, we call the day not after the salvation, but after the threat itself. After, in this case, the Purim, the lots that Haman cast to determine when our annihilation would be, because it was those lots and that decree that brought us to the new heights that we were able to reach post-Purim. And therefore, he says, you can read the verse, therefore they call this name Purim because of the poor. Therefore, and al king al kol divrei hageres hazos, meaning that it should remind us of the whole letter, of all the events. All the events were important. The poor itself, the challenge to our existence was not just important, but not just important because we were saved, but important because it brought us to this new heights that we were able to reach. And the truth is that this is the understanding of Rabbi Yaakov Milisa in his commentary Megillah Starim on the Megillah for the concept of the final thing that I put on the source sheet. That a person is obligated to, the translation here is to become intoxicated on Purim until he doesn't know the difference between Ar Haman and Baruch Mordechai. That cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. And Rabbi Yaakov Milisa says, the Megillah Starim says that the word livasume, it means to take pleasure. So a person is obligated to take pleasure in Purim to the point that he doesn't know the difference between cursed is Haman and Baruch and blessed is Mordechai, meaning at the end of the day, we reach such heights, not from inebriation, but we reach such heights in spirituality on Purim, after the story of Purim, when we reaccepted the Torah. That's what we have to appreciate the most. Not just that our bodies were saved, but that we reach new profound heights in our connection to God and our acceptance of Torah. And therefore, a person should take pleasure in that in Purim. That's what they should celebrate, to the point where they no longer want to curse Haman, because it was only because of Haman that we were able to reach those heights. So the same idea, this appreciation for, again, we don't appreciate Haman, but we don't have to curse him in the end. If we appreciate where we got to, we're happy that all this happened because we were able to achieve new heights in spirituality. And that's the idea of to take pleasure on Purim, to get such joy from the results of what Purim brought for us, that we no longer want to curse Haman, because it was only because of him that we actually were able to reaccept the Torah out of love and reach these new heights. So that goes very nicely with this approach of the Ksav Sofer, that it's called Purim because we want to celebrate the decree as well as the salvation, because it's the decree that led us to these new heights in spirituality. So if anybody needs to go, please, I'll just quickly sum up our 5 approaches to the name Purim. Number 1, it's called Purim because it highlights the great miracle that even though the lot said this was the worst day for the Jewish people, but God made the miracle that not only were we saved, but actually we were victorious on a day that should have been the worst for us. We achieved victory over our enemies. That's why we call it Purim, that the lots, the mazel was against us, but yet we were saved. Number 2, the lots was such an important part of the miracle. This gave us time to be able to respond properly to the threat with prayer and fasting and political maneuvering and lobbying and all of that. And it was only because Haman cast lots, and the lots themselves were miraculous, that God made them play out, that they only came out like a year later, or almost a year later, many months later, that would be the day of annihilation. And therefore we call the name after this important part of the miracle. Answer number 3 was this creative answer of the Be'er Yosef, that it had to do with the bed that Haman fell on, that we're trying to bring out, that was also an important part of the miracle. We call it by the name that also means bed. It means the lots. You tried to cast lots, but you met your end because of a pariah, a different type of pariah, a bed that you fell on, which was also a part of the miracle. And number 4 was not necessarily explaining why we call it lots, but explaining why we call it in the Aramaic, that the message of the Be'er Yosef is that there's much more. This is a Megillah Esther. There's a lot hidden beneath the surface of this Megillah in terms of the miracle, that we call it the Aramaic, the Persian version of the of the word pur, rather than the Hebrew gorel, because we want to say that just like this word is in the Persian, so too the whole Megillah is in a Persian version, but beneath there is our version, where the miracle is really much greater. We just couldn't write it that way. And finally, this last answer of the Ksav Sofer, that we call it Purim because actually the Purim, the lots and the decree against us is in the end something that we have great appreciation for, because it's what brought us to teshuvah, to repentance, and to reach new heights in our acceptance of Torah. Okay.
Thank you very much.